Where in the Folk is not and should not be viewed as a news source. Any names, places, or likenesses mentioned are purely fictional, and any information discussed is purely speculative. Guest opinions are their own and do not reflect those of anyone else. Where in the Folk is not responsible for content accuracy of any stories that are told or what people do with these stories. This show is vulgar, sometimes graphic, and due to its content, it should not be viewed by anyone, actually.
Welcome to another episode of Where in the Folk. I hope everybody's had a great weekend. And we have Sara from Paranormally Correct with us tonight. How are you doing tonight, Sara?
I am doing good. How about you all?
Good.
Oh,
Good.
I'm doing swimmingly. That's my word of the day, swimmingly. Try to use that before you go to bed. Anyway, what are we getting into tonight, y'all?
Well, I mean, Sara's been on with us before numerous times, usually to talk about other stuff. And we realized we've never really had like a Sara episode. So we wanted to do a formal Paranormally Correct episode, talk about everything that you have going on. I know you got some crazy stories for us. And when we were talking about serial killers a few weeks ago, you mentioned that you had a very interesting serial killer story that we definitely want to hear. But I guess, first of all, introduce yourself to everybody that may not know you already.
Well, I am the host of Paranormally Correct, the creator of Paranormally Correct. I used to be on YouTube. Now I'm primarily on TikTok. I host the original Ghost Story live stream where I have people come on and tell their wild, crazy paranormal stories. It's a good time. Outside of that, I'm also a writer. What else do? I wrangle parrots in my free time. Used to be a ghost hunter. I kind of just do a little bit of everything. And speaking of parrots, they're probably going to scream, so I apologize in advance for that.
No worries.
They start talking. So, but that's mostly me in a nutshell, I think.
So what, like just going back to the beginning, what got you started in all this?
In the paranormal or in social media? Because there's
Well, how did it translate? Did you start in social media or did you start in the paranormal?
No, I got into the paranormal. Well, I grew up in Eastern Kentucky, and it's superstition land pretty much in Eastern Kentucky. You know, we have a lot of there's a lot of supernatural elements to the culture of the mountains in Eastern Kentucky and stuff like that. And so I grew up around a lot of old people that told a lot of spooky stories. And so as I got older, I started hunting for spooky stories, and that kind of led me to ghost hunting. So when the ghost hunter revolution came around in the early 2000s, I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to ghost hunt. And not much longer after the original Ghost Hunters show came out, there was like a big boom of paranormal investigators. And so I kind of jumped on that train a little bit inadvertently because I didn't realize it was about to be a boom. It's like a big turning point in time for people who were into the paranormal. And just kind of it snowballed from there. I started doing like conventions and stuff, and like big hosted ghost hunts where there'd be a convention, and then afterwards you'd investigate the location and networking and meeting people, and then kind of got into like the TV aspect of it with like A&E and travel and stuff like that. And it kept getting, crazier, and the momentum was good and all that. The social media part kind of actually came in after I had pretty much stepped away from the paranormal community for roughly 5 or 10 years. And at the time, I kind of didn't know what I was doing. So I just jumped in head first. I was like, well, just kind of all over the place talking about my ghost experiences and things that have happened around the world. But it wasn't until TikTok that I kind of found my center where I needed to be, which was specifically Appalachian stuff. Because I think there's a big interest in that nowadays. So it's kind of the short version, I suppose.
Hey, Steven.
Hey, Steven.
Hey, everybody. How are you?
Good. We're just getting into Sara's background a little bit. That's awesome, though. I know that your TikTok specifically is amazing. And the format that you have, I know that probably this fall you're going to fire back up, maybe around spooky season. But the format of your show where, you let people who may otherwise not have a voice, like, truckers and, people who travel all over the United States and see things, like, you give them a voice. And I think that's one of the reasons that you have well-deserved, infamy on TikTok.
I'm infamous.
He almost gave you a compliment.
Yeah.
That's good though. I'll take it.
It is pretty cool though. I mean, like,
Yes.
I do love the structure of it, because you hear some really creepy stories on there. You hear some that are mind-boggling, I guess you could say, as well. But there are people that's got truly crazy encounters that come on there quite often. I enjoy it. I enjoy it when I listen.
Last Friday, the guy was talking about the firsthand accounts from his grandfather and the werewolves. I mean, where else are you going to hear that?
Yeah, exactly. I love it. I love hearing people's stories, and that's what kind of drove me in the direction that I went in with TikTok, because it's very different than what I used to do on YouTube. But I realized that the most important thing about ghost hunting was kind of the stories that you have afterwards.
Yes.
And, paranormal experiences and, all that stuff. It's so much better when you can just like kind of sit around a campfire and tell spooky stories to each other. So
yeah, that's really my favorite part of a lot of these conventions and stuff and conferences is after all the pizzazz, like in the evening, usually people get together and just share stories. And I don't know, there's just something about it, like, especially even being out in the field, like investigating, it has its own kind of vibe to it. And
right.
I know that we all enjoy it. When was the last time that you were actually out doing it, like in a spooky place?
Like just ghost hunting?
Yeah.
The last ghost hunt I did was, 2022, and it was the Paramount in Ashland, Kentucky. So the big theater in downtown. And it was pretty exciting. It was, because I've always wanted to investigate there. I'd done the Holland Museum back in like 2012 or 13. I think we did a couple of other places up and down the main road there over the years, but I'd always wanted to go to the Paramount specifically because, the legend of Paramount Joe. And I always wanted to run into him. I remember being a kid and going to see plays at the Paramount. And while I was in the audience, like looking around to see if I could see Paramount Joe, because I've always heard about him my whole life. But yeah, that's the last one I did. And I would like to get back into it, but it seems like the landscape has kind of changed as far as like putting together a ghost team and like actually scheduling investigations.
Yeah.
So it's something I would like to do again, but it's just always a little bit out of reach for some reason. So
I mean, the scheduling the investigations, that's just getting together and trespassing, right? That's what we used to do.
Yeah.
See that's when you didn't plan a ghost hunt, you planned an adventure.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I know we've talked about the tunnels too in Richmond a couple of times. Like I think that's kind of the approach you would have to take with something like that.
You dress all in black, get all your gear, and park 2 miles away.
Yeah, and just scatter if something happens.
It's everybody for themselves. You see the lights,
and you better not tell on us if you get caught.
I see we have Mike. Mike said that he wishes that TikTok was more accessible to the blind. Mike is a regular listener. We always talk about your stuff, and I do wish that too, Mike, because the streams really are awesome.
Yeah, they really are cool.
Yes.
I've heard some awesome stuff. I've heard some loons on there too, though. I guess that's going to happen with any live stream.
Listen, my favorite of all time. What was his name? Hollow Frank.
Was it
the guy that he was a Vietnam vet, I think, and he thinks that there's I think he lives in Arkansas, and he has a property where he's seeing like a 7 or 8 foot tall thing in the woods, bipedal, and he is basically sawing trees in half with a machine gun.
Oh, that's Chris King.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Is it? Okay.
I think Hollow Frank was the one where there was like some type of shootout in a trailer park and Jesus showed up. I believe that was his story. But there's so many stories I can't keep them all straight.
So you get the good, the bad, and the ugly with
Yeah, but you know, I love those stories. Those are actually my favorite. It's when people come on and they tell me wild stuff like that. I love it.
Yeah.
No, that's amazing. So what about the I guess let's get into serial killer territory. So I whenever you were mentioning it before, I was just like, that is absolutely crazy that you had I guess a family member or a distant relative at least. What
Pretty close relative.
was it? Was it
My uncle?
So give us the skinny on that. Like what?
Well, so first of all, it's my uncle. It's my mom's brother, her only brother. My mom had a bunch of sisters, but they only had one brother, and he was the oldest child. And I'm not sure what year he was born in, but it's a very long time ago because my mother was actually like very old before she passed. So all of my aunts were older than her. She was a baby of the family. So we're talking about like 1930s to 1950s activity here when this happened. For that reason, he's a serial killer, but he's not really known for being a serial killer because it kind of happened before the pop culture, you know, serial killer moniker, I guess you could say, kind of happened. So like, you know, before people were interested in true crime and forensic files and all that type of stuff. So he's kind of one that has flown under the radar a little bit. I don't know where to start. You'll have to ask me some questions to kind of get me going here.
So
how did beginning?
I mean, how did you even start hearing about it when you were younger?
So that's a good question because there's a huge controversy in my family about him. And just to kind of put this in perspective, I have one cousin, him and his sister didn't even know throughout their entire life that they had an uncle until around the year 2000. And I believe my cousin's in like his 50s at this point. So he's significantly older than me. So in the early 2000s, you know, he would have been an adult and his sister's a little older than him. I'm not sure about ages here, but basically they were full on adults and they didn't know that our uncle existed because my aunt had concealed this information because it's such a big taboo in my family and always has been. And it's funny too, how like everybody in the family has a variation of the story. Everybody has a version of their own. Everybody knows a little bit about it, but I think my mom was the one who knew the most and she kind of kept quiet about it. But the reason that I knew about it at a young age is because we used to get letters from him. And my mom inherited the family home. So I guess that's how he knew, you know, he maybe didn't have my aunt's mailing addresses, but he had her home address because he, you know, also lived there at one point in time. And I remember being, you know, pretty young and she would get these big envelopes and take out these big sheets of like yellow legal paper with these big, long, like extensively long letters. And she'd get real frazzled and she'd read them. And I'd be like, what is that? Can I see it? Can I see it? Are you gonna let me read it? Because I was like an annoying kid, you know? And she would just be so beside herself. She'd be like, no, you can't read it. And then she would take these letters and burn them. And so all I knew was that it was from my uncle. I was like, well, why can't we talk to my uncle? Like, what's the deal with him? And as far as knowing that he was actually a literal serial killer, I don't think I knew that fact about him. I knew that he'd been in trouble. I knew that he'd done a lot of stuff, but I think I was probably in my late teens or early 20s before I knew that technically, like, he's a little bit famous if you kind of dig back through history a little bit. So yeah, it's a very tangled web of information here. So I'm trying to keep it straight in my head. But so that was kind of my introduction to it, was seeing her get these mysterious letters and not really knowing what she knew, because she didn't ever tell me what her hang up or what her contention was with this situation.
Okay. Well, I'm just curious, what got him started in this? Was he affiliated with other people or?
So here's where, and I'm going to put this on at the very beginning. This applies to everything I say from here on out. This is all alleged. Please don't sue me, anybody.
Well, we had the big disclaimer at the beginning, so
yeah. Basically, this is folklore. Okay, we'll put it under those pretenses. So allegedly, and this is from information I've collected over the years, because like I said, everybody's got a version, everybody's kind of talked different bits and pieces of the story. So what I've been able to piece together is that when my uncle was young, and like I said, he was the oldest child, so he was primarily at one point raised by my mother's grandparents, or maybe great grandparents. I think it was her grandparents. So he was kind of an out of control kid, from what I've heard. And I think where he is older, nobody really knows in great detail how bad it was. But I've heard that he actually killed somebody when he was like 10 or 12. I don't know if that's true. One of my cousins says, yes, it absolutely is true. One of them said that they didn't know anything about that. This was not something I ever heard my mom talk about, but allegedly my uncle, when he was a kid, he was so violent and aggressive. Like, he was hurting animals, as they do. He was hurting people. And I not to get like too graphic here, I'll try to keep it
PG. No, you can be as graphic as you want to.
Yeah. So apparently one of the reasons he went to live with, they called him Pappy, so like the grandparent, the old man, a mean old Irish man in the hills of Eastern Kentucky. This old guy beat the ever-loving shit out of my uncle. So every time he would like step out of line, or he would hurt an animal, because I've heard that he killed horses, that he killed livestock, a lot of various gruesome things like that. Pappy would absolutely beat the living shit out of him. And so that's why they sent him, I guess, to live with the grandparent, is because he could kind of maybe keep him in line, possibly a little better than, his own mom and dad could. Because my grandfather, Emmett's dad, was injured in a coal mine. So at some point he probably wasn't able to raise this kid. And I don't know about the timeline. So I don't know if my grandfather was already injured by the time Emmett was causing these problems. But in a roundabout way, he ended up with the grandparents. So from there, I guess he was in a lot of trouble throughout his teenage years, but it wasn't until his late teenage years or early 20s when the ball kind of started really rolling in the direction of serial killer.
That's what was hell of a childhood.
What was his name?
Emmett Monroe Spencer. Yeah. And there's not a whole lot online about him. There was a reporter at one point got a hold of several people in my family, and it caused kind of like a big disruption. I found this out not too many years ago, that this person had gone around and contacted some of my aunts and some of my cousins. And my aunts were such strange people. Like, it was like this mentality of, we can just ignore it and it doesn't exist anymore. We can ignore it and it goes away, out of sight, out of mind. So, one of my aunts, like I said, never even told her kids that she had a brother. And then some of the other aunts, I guess, just, they didn't really put it in the forefront of anything. But this news reporter, who was doing kind of like, I don't know if he was trying to do, it was something basically on the woman who was involved in this, which I'll get to that in a little bit. He caused a lot of problems. He stirred up a lot of crap amongst the family. And that's actually how my cousin found out that we had an uncle, is because this guy got a hold of him and he's like, I'm doing some research on your uncle, the serial killer. And he's like, an uncle? I don't have an uncle. And so, my cousin gets a hold of his mom, and then it was just like all hell started breaking loose. And, here she's having flashbacks, because something that I can't really speak on is that apparently she had a pretty awful experience with my uncle. And I won't say for sure, because that's not really my story to tell. And I'm not sure the details. I know my mom also had something that she was kind of hiding about the family dynamic. she never told me what it was. I never really asked because, like, it didn't really feel comfortable to ask that.
Yeah.
But I feel like some of the girls in the family probably experienced, negative things with him. We'll put it that way.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, he probably had creepy. It sounds like he had creepy vibes.
Probably, yeah. And I don't know, like, it's funny because some of the stuff, and I think this is what I was kind of originally going at there, and I got sidetracked, but some of the stuff that's online about him is very likely not accurate, and a lot of it definitely conflicts with what I've heard. And I never can remember her name. Let me pull her name up here to make sure I don't get it wrong. I always want to call her Mary. Yeah, Mary Catherine Hampton is the woman who's involved. I think she's passed away now. If any of her family sees this, please don't sue me. Again, all alleged, just a folk tale at this point. She was kind of made into a martyr in the situation, and to hear what I've heard about it, she was just as guilty as him for a lot of stuff that happened in the very beginning. But like I said, I don't want to get ahead of myself. So,
Yeah. I mean, we're really like digging in at this point. Like, this is crazy. Like that. So I guess we're kind of at the point. So he lived with the grandfather,
Pappy.
So he gets like around adulthood. What happens?
Yeah, so there was an age gap. I'm not sure how much. I'm not very well prepared today, I'll be honest. But there was an age gap between him and Mary, and so he was basically an adult. I'm pretty sure she was a teenager. And the way I understood it, from what little my mom did tell me and what little I've gathered from the family, that all kind of like actually goes together. Because, like I said, there are a lot of conflicting stories, but this is what made the most sense. So they were boyfriend and girlfriend. There's even some pictures you can find online of them. I wish I had thought to send you. I don't know if you'd want to show the pictures, but there are some pictures you can find online of them together. What my mom always told was that in the beginning, because it started out like what put them in motion as far as like fleeing and evading the police was because in Sandy Hook, there was someone got shot and killed. My mom says that the woman did it, Mary Catherine, and that my uncle took the blame for it. And that was the story that I was told growing up. Because, like I said, she didn't really always want to talk too much about this in detail. But what she told me was that they were boyfriend and girlfriend. Mary Catherine killed somebody and Emmett took the blame for it. And in order to keep them both out of trouble, they took off. I don't know if they stole a car, if he had a car, if she had a car, but they hit the road and they drove across the country. And that's kind of where the story starts to split into a million different pieces and change depending on who you ask and like what you read online, because the articles online are very different than the story that I was told through my family. So, but that's basically how it started. So.
And how long were they on the run for?
I don't know. I think it was several years altogether, if you count, because at one point, Mary Catherine was arrested. And now those are the details that I don't know by heart 100%.
Got you.
But that's the kind of stuff that you can actually look up and read online. I know that I believe at first they drove west. So I think they went out like towards the desert or maybe like towards Washington or something. And apparently there was like this whole hitchhiker murderer situation that they had going on where they would like pretend that the vehicle was broken down so that people would stop and try to help them. And then they would abduct them. And of course, Mary Catherine, this is where it gets messy, is she would later go on to tell reporters and stuff that she was a captive just as much as the hitchhikers and the Good Samaritans were, saying that basically my uncle was the mastermind of all of this and that, she didn't have any part in it, which is very contrary, very suspicious to me that, I don't know, something about that never made sense. But to outsiders, like the guy who did the research in the articles, I'm sure he bought it quite easily. But I think that at least in the beginning, I think this woman was part of something, and then maybe at some point she changed her mind.
So, yeah, wow. So they were. Sounds like they were probably a full team. As far as working together in this. Did
Yeah.
with the hitchhiker type deal, it's how many did he have a certain type that he went after, I guess?
That I don't know. And I don't know if it's because, like I said, this happened so long ago. It was before, before kind of like, I feel like now as a society, most people know a lot about like crime stories, and people watch crime dramas, and everybody knows like, here are the signs and symptoms of a serial killer, and here's like the motive, and here's all these characteristics and all these ingredients that go together to make a serial killer. I don't know if they paid attention to that kind of thing back then.
This would have probably been before like profiling and like the full FBI workups and stuff of things like that.
Pretty sure. Yeah. And I think I've read something about when that whole concept kind of became a thing in our government, and I'm pretty sure it came way later. So yeah, I don't think they really had much of a concept of those types of things. And I don't think anybody really knows how many people he did or didn't kill.
That's what I was going to ask.
Yeah. And I know that there's like nowadays there's a number that you have to hit apparently before you're considered a serial killer. But there's also a concept where like he may have lied about people, but again, I don't want to get ahead of myself here. So
is this her right here? Is that Mary Catherine?
That is her. Yeah.
Sweet. I'm good at finding stuff.
Rebecca said, how long was it until he got caught?
That again, I'm not entirely sure about the amount of time that they were on the road.
Got you.
Yeah. So I don't know. Like I wish I'd have been more prepared for this.
Oh no, this is great.
It's like the numbers and stuff. Like I know the family lore. I know kind of like, some insider details of it. But as far as like giving you specific dates, I can't give you specific dates.
And that's him, ain't it?
And that is him. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
He looks like somebody from Eastern Kentucky. He looks like my grandpa, actually. Strangely enough, he looks like he came out of the coal mines. All right. Cool.
Yeah, that's wild.
Oh, wow. So trying to get information from your family was not easily done.
Yeah, my mom was one of those people. I don't know. Maybe she just wasn't good at keeping a secret. Maybe she just liked to gossip. Like, I don't know what her deal was, but I think she probably talked more about this situation than any of the sisters in the family. Some of my aunts, I don't know, maybe their kids, because I have a lot of cousins and I haven't really talked about this with all of them. I've tried to, but some of them are a little kind of standoffish about discussing this. And so I haven't made it too far trying to get more information. But I think my mom probably talked more about it than any of the other sisters. And she would tell me bits and pieces here and there.
Did she ever tell you, like at any point in time, like, did she ever go into sort of the letters? Like,
yeah, I asked her, as an adult, I try to get her to tell me, like what was in the letters? Like, why would you get so upset about them? And, I remember this or that, and like, just try to engage with her about it. And she'd always kind of give me like the same handful of answers. Like, oh, he was like threatening us. He was making threats about coming back. He was, but she wouldn't really be specific about like what he was threatening. So I don't know if he was writing like really wild madman letters, or because they were big, they were bulky and they were on legal paper. So that's like extra long right there. Just one sheet is longer than notebook paper. So it's a lot of words. So he must have had something to say, but I do remember at one point, when I was a kid, somewhere along the way, she had said something that it kind of led me to feel like she's afraid that he's going to try to come back. And one of the reasons that I think she was so afraid is because he was in several prisons. He was in one in Florida at one point. I think he was in another be in Iowa. But he was in the Moundsville prison at one point, and he escaped. And there's like this whole thing. I'm pretty sure it's in Moundsville prison. They would say like it's, you can't escape. There's no escape, and he escaped because he was like highly intelligent, like spooky intelligent. So somehow he found a way out. And I think that's what scared her so bad, is that he'd done it before, and
Like nobody can control him.
yeah.
I'm reading a little bit about it right now. Gene Miller, who won a Pulitzer Prize for his reporting on Spencer, actually.
Yeah.
He reported that investigators from 14 states come to question them at one point, and that Spencer was charming, persuasive, and usually very intelligent, is essentially what it's saying.
Mhm.
And there's actually a quote that Miller has of Spencer saying, "Me and Mary Catherine killed maybe 25 or 28 people."
Shoo. Yeah, Bortles. He was a federal inmate. I guess. Like it sounds like he was a federal prison.
Yeah, probably. And the big one in Florida. I think, I don't know. You probably will come across it in the article. I forget which one. It's a very well-known one in Florida. That one was probably federal for sure, but I don't really know for positive about those types of details.
So Rebecca wants to know, I guess outside of your mom, do you know if anybody maintained contact with him?
I don't know if anybody really tried. There are two of my aunts who I never really got to talk at all before they passed away. I never got to talk to them at all about like what their experience with him was. And like I said, I've tried to talk to some of their kids and grandkids to kind of, I know that my Aunt Betty's, I probably should have said that. One of my aunt's sides of the family. I mean, whatever, you could probably Google this all, but so her side of the family, I did talk to one of my cousins, or like second or third cousins, last year. And I was like, we need to talk about this. We need to talk about the serial killer in our family that nobody else wants to talk about. And she's like, yes, absolutely. Because me and my mom are so curious about it. And like, we know some stuff. And I'm like, you need to call me. And then nobody ever called. So that was kind of like, I don't know if that side of my family maybe is kind of, because everybody's a little bit weird about it. And I'm like, we're not responsible for what he did. So I feel like we should talk about it because it's interesting and it's, it's family drama. And I just think that if we talk about it, we won't feel so bad about it anymore. But anyway. So he escapes. What do you know where they found him? I don't think he made it far when he escaped Moundsville. I feel like they caught him pretty quickly, like within 12 hours or, half a day or something like that. So, But I don't know a lot of details on it. I just know that my mom was really afraid about that whole thing because it had happened at one point. So she thought it would probably happen again.
So I found a picture of him with, I found that one. I mean, they're a good-looking couple, really. I mean,
so does he stay in prison, or what happens like later on?
Let's see. So I know, like at one point. So this at some point ties into the Walker family murders, and some people are familiar with that case. And it's weird too. I'm not a person who follows true crime stuff. I don't listen to the podcast. I don't consume any type of content along those lines because it just, not because of anything to do with this, it just doesn't interest me. It feels invasive to me. So I don't really get into it. But to each their own. But I don't know. I guess the Walker family is a popular one, but I don't know how he's not 100% associated with it, because from what I understand, he probably did it. But then I guess there's also this part of the story where it's like, well, he lied about some of his murder cases, and we were able to prove that, he wasn't telling us the truth because he confessed to, like, after they caught him, apparently he confessed to some murders that they thought was not possible for him to have committed based on where he was and when he was there. So at some point, and this is kind of funny, he discredited himself as a serial killer by lying about killing more people than he did. So I don't know, but
So the Walker family, was that supposed to be like before he went into prison or after he got out?
Yeah, no, that was before, because I don't know if he did any small stints in jail, like leading up to when he was finally detained. But he did a lot. He had a lot of stuff going on before they finally got him, and then he was moved through the system, how they kind of move people based on rules. That's like a whole other thing. But yeah, the Walker family murders happened in, I think I have it pulled up here. It was in 59.
Yeah.
And
December 19th, 1959.
Yeah.
He is mentioned in here with this that he confessed to the murders, but the confession was discredited by Sarasota County, which, Florida in the 50s, if Florida in the 80s has any comparison to Florida in the 50s, it's kind of similar to where we come from. Totally. Like, he shot 12 times in the back, suicide.
Yeah.
Like, but you gotta think too. There's a real famous serial killers is Otis Toole, and I always forget his name. They made portrait of a serial killer after him.
Oh yeah,
Henry something.
Yeah.
But they confessed to hundreds, but there was no doubt that they were serial killers. You know what I mean? But they confessed to like everything too. So
this might have been like one of the first cases where where he did that.
Henry Lee Lucas.
Where, you said he was highly intelligent. Like maybe he just thought like, hey, they got me pinned on these. I'm just going to lie about a bunch, and maybe they won't.
Yeah, that's when they. Yeah, that's when they determined that he was a pathological liar. So I guess that would have been an early version of claiming insanity or something.
Yeah, I don't know what he was thinking. Maybe he was just trying to troll them because, who knows? But yeah, he apparently confessed to things that, but I also wonder, is it possible that, he did do a lot of it and they just, for some reason, maybe they thought, it wasn't possible that he did it. I don't know, but spooky.
Yeah, that is spooky.
They probably had it pinned on somebody else already, and was like, nah. Like that's happened throughout history. Like, no, you didn't do it. We already got the guy that did it.
Right.
Well, yeah, because it could make them look foolish. Like if it really was, them, like they got the wrong guy or something.
Yeah.
So what? Go ahead.
Now, if I was looking at the right story there, though, that oh, never mind. I think I may have this confused with a different story. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So, does he die in prison?
He did die in prison. Yeah. Mary Catherine, she actually had F. Lee Bailey of O.J. Simpson fame. That was her lawyer, F. Lee Bailey. I don't know if you guys know Francis Lee Bailey. Ringing any bells?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, from OJ. Was it OJ's Dream Team? I think. I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
Rebecca asked if he ever had kids.
Interesting question. One of my cousins. Okay, so I have, and I don't think he would care for me talking about this because he's been pretty open about this. Otherwise, I would probably not tell this part of the story. But I think he'd be fine with it. So I have a cousin who was raised by one of our aunts, but he believes that he is actually the illegitimate child of our uncle instead, and that the aunts took him to try to kind of save him because, the trouble that the uncle and Mary Catherine were in. He feels very strongly about this. And one thing that I've discovered is like when you get to a certain age and you start kind of feeling that primal need to search for your heritage, like you kind of have some instincts that are pretty accurate for that type of thing. So he believes it. He feels strongly about it. And we kind of just took his word that, yeah, you may very well be. And I asked him one time, I was like, well, you know, this was back when, because I'm, like I said, I'm pretty sure Mary Catherine has passed now, but at the time, I think she was still living. And I asked him, I was like, have you ever thought about maybe doing like a DNA test? And just to kind of give you like peace of mind to kind of put it to bed for the final time. And that way you would know, you don't have to wonder anymore. And he's like, I don't think I can handle it. I don't think I would want to know. Like, it's easier for it to just kind of be up in the air. And I was like, really? Because I think I would want to know. You know, like, like, but you know, whatever you feel comfortable with. But I think I would know. I would want to know that information.
Yeah.
I feel like the window of opportunity kind of closed for that because she, like I said, she did pass away.
How old is the cousin?
Let's see. He is okay. So my sister was born in 1968. That cousin is about a year to 5 years older than her. So I'd say he roughly was born somewhere in the early 60s. But he said at one point, he's like, I have memories that would have been before I was born, you know, because what's on my birth certificate, there were like historical events that he remembered. You know how when you're a little kid, like really small, and you remember watching the TV, you remember seeing bits and pieces of things. He said he had memories like that, but if they were real memories, it would make him much older than he is on paper, if that makes sense.
It does.
He thought that maybe that was a clue as to where he came from, like if he was the child of Emmett and Mary Catherine versus one of the aunts.
Well, the reason I ask is because I don't know how prevalent it was outside of Appalachia, but that happened a lot. Like, I've got family members that were raised by other family members, but were the kids of other family members and just never knew it.
Yeah.
They got really old.
Happen.
Like,
yeah.
I've got like multiple, like not just one person. Like, it seemed to happen quite often. Like, if somebody just like, I can't take care of this baby, you take it. Like that happened a lot.
Especially like, imagine how you know, to his point, imagine how different his life would be if he knew for sure that he was basically the son of a serial killer.
Yeah.
The family would probably want to protect that.
There's Mary Catherine when she got older. I mean, right here in this region right here, she kind of she looks a little wild to me.
A little bit.
She does. Yeah, she definitely does.
All wide-eyed. But that's really crazy. That's a wild story. That's neat.
Yeah, that's insane. So is there anything else about it?
Oh yeah, there's probably tons of like tidbits of things that I'm sure when we get off here, I'll remember all of them immediately and be like, damn it, I didn't mention this one. You know, I think there's also a lot of interesting information for her side too, which I know less about her side. I do know that at some point when they were split up because they were both arrested, she was in like Louisiana or something. She was still pretty young. And hang on, I've got something beeping in the background. Hang on just a second.
Okay. This is crazy.
Yeah.
It is.
I mean, that's one of those things. Like, what would you do if you found out that you had an immediate family member that was a serial killer?
I don't know, dude. Like, because I don't know. Like, do you think it runs in the family? You know what I mean? Like, that's something I always think about.
Intentions,
yeah, yeah. I'm just like, if that, you know, little change survived the family tree and is still going, it could, you know, pop up somewhere else again, maybe.
Yeah, well, it's funny. I'm just gonna throw my family under the bus right now. So my brother has often been referred to as Little Emmett, and Emmett has a reputation in Elliott County, or he did, you know, at one point in time. And that was another thing that my mom really struggled with, is where she was the baby of the family. Some of her teachers even bullied her when she was in school about, you know, her older brother being a serial killer. And I, you know, kind of wonder if that was maybe a little bit of the reason behind why she was so bitter about Mary Catherine, is because people kind of pitied Mary Catherine, and they, you know, they held Emmett's crimes against his relatives and his family. And that's something that has followed through our family for that many generations. Because you're talking about like a small town where everybody knows everybody else's business.
Yeah.
Gossip spreads like wildfire, you know, shit like that. Just, it doesn't go away. It can kind of stick with you. And my brother was wild for most of his life, and many a time, you know, he was referred to as little Emmett. And my mom, boy, she'd get hotter to call her about that one. And I think it's funny because it's pretty close to accurate. But you know, I feel like he deserves it, is basically what I'm saying. But yeah, it's something that's kind of scary to think like, well, are we all nuts, or was it just the one?
It really makes you wonder.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a whole different deal when the call's coming from inside the house.
Yeah.
Oh man, yeah. It's with that type of thing going on, you know, and everyone in the community knowing it, and even the teachers behaving in that way. That's it makes a lot of sense as to why your family would try to bury this as deeply as they could.
Yeah. Well, and for my aunts, you know, one of my aunts, the one who concealed the fact that there ever was an uncle, you know, to her kids, she moved away really young. And, you know, she went like to other countries, and she lived in San Francisco, and like, you know, she had an adventurous life and very vastly different to, you know, where she came from. In fact, her son, my cousin, told me not that long ago that when he was like in high school or college, that some of his friends thought she was British, like she was from England. So she was like really distancing herself from the holler, you know what I mean? So she left it all behind. And I don't blame her. Live your best life, you know, like they say. But, and then I don't really know a couple of my aunts. I don't know how it factored into their life. If what my other cousin says is true about him being, you know, Emmett and Mary Catherine's child, then they definitely have some info on it. But I may have to give you all an update if I can ever get that one side of my family to tell me what they know.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Feeling they have information that I haven't heard yet.
You know, part of me thinks, and I don't know if you have any interest in this at all, but I think you should write something about this. Like about all of it. I know you don't like true crime, but this would be a super kick-ass story, like just to outline it.
Yeah. And it's, you know, I wish I had pressed a little harder, maybe to get my mom to talk about it more before she passed away. But I feel like for some reason, I feel like she probably knew the most or was willing to give up the most information. And I feel like I probably won't ever have that opportunity again, really. So I don't know, you know, and a lot of, you know, like I said earlier, a lot of my family, like they're all much older. Many of them have passed on. Most of my cousins are pretty old at this point. So I don't know, see who I can get to talk, but I feel like this is something that a lot of people are going to take to their grave. Honestly, it's going to be lost in time.
That's wild. That's crazy to think about. But the story is, I mean, this is wild that you're so close to it.
Yeah, it is strange. And I tried to look up, you know, just several years ago, I think it was probably around like 2017, 18, maybe 2019. I was trying to kind of Google search just to see if I could find anything. And that's when I kind of started to realize that there's not much online about it. And what is online is not necessarily, I don't feel like it's all 100% accurate because, you know, it's mostly told, recounted from Mary Catherine. So it's not the full story, but what I was able to find, it was interesting to come across like YouTube videos where people who do like that type of content, they would dig and dig and dig until they would come across that name. And so there are like at least 3 YouTube videos from true crime content creators that mentioned my uncle's name. And like, so I watched some of these videos and I left comments on them. I was like, that's my uncle. Like, this is so weird to hear strangers talking about my uncle. And it kind of, I don't know, maybe this is why I don't like true crime, but
Understandable.
it got me to thinking about, like, what if this was a more recent thing and it was, you know, more impactful in my life and my family's life, and it wasn't something that, you know, feels like folklore at this point, happened in the 50s. What if it was more modern and recent and like kind of painful, and like to hear people talk about it online?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if people, like, do people think about that before they make content? Like, I don't know, just curious.
Yeah,
but
yeah. Even when we were talking about Charlie the other week, like I always try to make a statement like that. We, you know, we try to focus on the families and stuff, and you know, it's more about, you know, spreading awareness to hopefully, you know, keep stuff like that from happening. Hopefully, you know what I mean. Like
nature too, to be fascinated in it. I mean, you know, I get a pass here because it's a relative, but I'm fascinated by the fact that this exists in my family. And you know, I know lots of people are interested, like the crime content and crime shows and movies and stuff. It's, you know, highly successful stuff. And I think people do have like a natural inclination to kind of search out stuff like that. I don't know what the psychology behind it is. Like maybe it's just like a train wreck. You just can't look away.
yeah,
Or maybe it makes you confront thoughts and feeling. I don't know, because I'm not like into that really, but it's weird from both sides of the coin, I guess, because, you know, you have the family who experience it, and then you have like the onlookers who are interested in it. It's something weird to think about, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, that's nuts. We appreciate you talking about that.
Yeah.
I know that some of that was super personal, and if you figure out more, like, you're definitely going to have to give us an update.
Yeah, I would love to. I would love to keep digging around and, you know, find out what everybody knows. It's just whether or not they're willing to tell me, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is. Like, when it comes to serial killers from Kentucky, like, they usually fly on their radar quite a bit. Like Donald Harvey, for example, he's actually from here where I'm at. He worked at the hospital here. He was the angel of death. He probably killed 36 people. And then you have the America's first serial killers that were the Hart brothers in the 1700s. They roamed through here. Like, you don't really hear about all those a lot, and it's strange. I wonder what that is like.
I have a theory on that. So on paper, my mom didn't even exist until she was like 10 years old. You know, she was born in 1947, maybe not. We're not even sure. Like, this is a Kentucky thing, and especially the further you go back through history, the worse it kind of gets. Kentucky is notoriously bad for not keeping records, for not keeping that. Maybe not even. I would just go one step further and say Kentucky's bad about just not participating in the rest of the world. Kentucky is full of like rootin' tootin' outlaws that have always been kind of playing by their own rules. And the further back in time you go, the worse this gets, honestly. Because growing up in Elliott County, Kentucky in the 80s, I could tell you stories you would absolutely not believe, because you would think, how in the world could that possibly have happened? And it just went unnoticed, or it went unpunished, or, you know, because it's Kentucky, because things just disappear, things get swept under the rug.
Yeah.
When I was growing up in Sandy Hook in the 80s and 90s, our jailer used to ride a horse, which him and his horse would get drunk. The horse was also an alcoholic, and then they would proceed to wreck. And so him and his horse, like, he rode through buildings, he rode off cliffs. Like, this guy and his horse was always drunk, and this was their jailer, you know. And then a lot of people like this one, but I don't think anybody believes me. When I was in elementary school, all the way through high school, my school bus driver was the sheriff. His sheriff uniform to drive us home at 3:00 every day. And his brother, the deputy sheriff, drove the bus in front of us. So, like, Kentucky does not play by anybody else's rules.
Yeah. We actually have pictures. We were going through McDonald's drive-through one night, and there were very similar. That there were groups of people that would get together to ride horses, and everybody would just be sloshed, like completely obliterated. And we've got a picture. We're in the McDonald's drive-through, and there's horses. There's a guy like riding a mule through the McDonald's drive-through at 3:00 in the morning.
Wow.
I mean, yeah, I mean, Tully and I are from southeastern Kentucky, and it's pretty accurate. Like, there was stuff happening all the time that people just like,
One of the more famous things from our area was during, I think it was like maybe like around 2010 census.
Oh, yeah.
There was a census worker that, quote unquote, killed himself, and they found him strung to a tree with fed carved into his chest, or was it was either wrote on his chest or carved into his chest. And
the story on CNN was that it was wrote on his chest. I talked to somebody that was there, and they said it was carved. So and that was ruled a suicide.
And then they started draining these ponds on a notorious four-wheeling trail. It's like a huge four-wheeling trail in that area, and they found a safe and found a woman in the safe.
Yeah.
Someone came forward.
It was a filing cabinet.
Okay. Somebody came forward to like narc on who did it. They then found the narc at the pond, tied and burned at the pond.
Yeah.
So there's definitely a lot of like Southern justice that happens in those regions.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah, it's insane. Growing up in where we grew up in the 90s, like I haven't seen this, but I always heard we had the biggest murder per capita, like the biggest murder rate per capita in the 90s.
Wow.
In America. Which kind of plays true because I know a bunch of people that lost family and stuff there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's how it is just across the state line from where I live in Oklahoma, in southeast Oklahoma.
Yeah.
That was you have one really big county there, and you have one sheriff. So yeah, a lot of people went missing, and they're
into their own hands.
Like yes, that. Yeah, that's they're a different breed over there. Some of them folks are. I mean, a lot of really good people, but you have some people that it doesn't bother them to burn down 5,000 acres because they just had a bad day.
Right. Yeah. To shift maybe for a second from true crime, from the depressing stuff. Sarah,
I was just thinking though, like I would not want to live in another state besides Kentucky.
There's something about the mountains. You know, my dad always he comes up with these sayings. And when I moved, I'm still in Kentucky, but I moved north, and he's like, people move away from here to make money and stuff, and then spend their whole lives trying to get back, because there's just something about the mountains. And I believe that. I see a lot of Appalachian content, and sometimes I do yearn to move back to that area, but also there's nothing there. Like there's a reason that you move away. And
I'm down here.
Well, you're not in our hometown though. Like there's nothing to do. There's not much in the way of work, and I think that's why people move away. But there is something that just grips people.
There's all kinds of work down there. You can be a amateur pharmacist.
Yeah. But to shift from true crime for a minute, Sarah, I know that you were a part of sort of a dog man community at one point. So tell us a little bit about that. Let's get into some cryptid stuff for a minute.
Well, yeah. So I was part of one of the biggest dog man organizations in the country. I was mostly only there for when they needed to film on A&E and they wanted to look inclusive. I'm just going to be 100% about this. That's the only reason I was involved in it, because I used to ask them, like, are you guys going to take me and like teach me actually how to hunt a dog man? Because I'm a ghost hunter. I do photos. I don't know anything about hunting cryptids. And no, the answer was always no. But if they needed to film for A&E, they're like, come on, Sarah, come on out. We want them to be more inclusive. So that's why I cut ties. One of the reasons that I cut ties with them. But I did have, a couple of instances that were kind of fun and exciting, I guess. Most of which happened when we filmed for A&E. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that. I said it, so whatever. We filmed it was like a sort of like a pilot episode slash, they call it like a sizzle reel. So when they're trying to pitch a show, they'll do like kind of a mini episode, mini pilot, and then they get all this extra footage and stuff. And so we went to, I forget where it was. It was somewhere way up in Ohio, north of, I think we were like north of Cincinnati, but not by too far. There's a lot of dogman sightings out there. So
Are you around Germantown?
Yes, it was that's Germantown. That's it. Yep. And we went out to the woods and we filmed a bunch of stuff, and we went to the homes of some people and we filmed segments, where they did like reenactments and had us walk through fields of grass. And then they, so it was never like full on dogman hunting. I never really got to kind of like experience what the men got to experience, I guess. But it was close enough. It was fun. It was interesting. I didn't know how I felt at the time about Dogman. I still don't. I have a lot of people weekly tell me that Dogman definitely exists. Does he exist? I have no idea.
So you never actually saw anything wild. Did you like hear anything or?
Yeah, we did hear something. One night when we were filming that same project, we did multiple, we did so many sequences at so many different places. There was a forest somewhere around Germantown that's pretty well known to have like dogman sightings, and it's pretty remote. Even if you look at it on Google Maps, you could tell it's not, it's kind of away from a lot of like neighborhoods and stuff like that. And that was significant to me because I kept thinking, I was like, what am I hearing? Is this someone's pet dog or like, what are we hearing here? Because we hadn't been in the woods for too long. We're all standing around getting ready to film. They put up like a fake moon, which that was really cool. And we're standing there out in the middle of the freaking woods, and we hear a wolf just going to town, just howling. And then there's a second wolf starts howling. And I'm like, is that Dogman? Is he here with us? Like, and I'm like looking around everybody. I'm like, is that normal? Is that supposed to happen? And everybody's just like, we don't know. So I don't know if it was, are wolves a thing in Germantown? Like,
wolves are pretty rare around this area. They started across Western Kentucky. They did reintroduce wolves. So it is possible that there's a stray wolf around this area. There's been stray wolves seen around Cecil's area too, around Laurel County. But they're definitely not common. And it would be very uncommon, in my opinion, for there to be multiples.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Especially with the human presence of, that part of Ohio anyway. It's flat mostly. Yeah. Not a very good habitat for animals that are trying to lay low.
Yeah, it's some of the stories that I have heard out of Germantown where evidently they have quite a few cornfields in that area. So,
okay.
And that's where some of the people had seen them actually crossing the road from one cornfield into another cornfield and things like that. So, or people getting chased down the highway.
Yeah. Yeah. We talked to some people who had similar stories. So, yeah.
We have somebody named Best Tomato Sauce in the chat. Hello. Drop the recipe.
Yes.
I need a good one. I don't know. Dogman Steven's got probably the most legitimate picture I've ever seen of a dogman. I think
it's something crazy for sure. Yeah, I think I told you guys I came up empty on my trail cams this go around, but I think I need 2 more. That way I can just have like every single angle of this area covered.
I'm coming up there in 2 weeks, so you'll have something on there.
You have a new picture of the moon.
But yeah, so outside of the Dogman stuff, have you ever looked for any other cryptids or seen anything that you thought was strange out in the field?
I mean, I saw Bigfoot. I feel stupid even saying that at this point. Like, sometimes I'm like, should I say it? Should I keep it to myself? I don't even know. No, I saw Bigfoot, guys. He's real. I don't know about Dogman. I can't speak for Dogman. Bigfoot's real. I saw a Bigfoot. I think I've told you guys about that though, so I don't know. But I did like a little mini investigation after I had that sighting, where here I'm out here trying to be like pseudoscientific and like measure distances and like what things look like from here versus there, and try to find some footprints or something like that, or some hair. I had no idea what I was doing, but I feel like I did a pretty decent job of just kind of like confirming what I knew I experienced, because the thing was enormous, and that's always.
How tall do you think it was?
It was enormous. It's not even the height. Like, one of the things I did, like I took my camera out and I got, I set up my camera right about where the car was from the time I first started to see this thing cross the street. And like I walked down the street and I walked in front of the camera, and then I watched the footage back, and the whole thing was fresh in my mind. And I was like, I personally, I'm 5'11". Okay. So I'm not a short woman. This thing would have been way, 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 way bigger than me, but also like its proportions would have been like way bigger than even a large man.
Yeah. Tell me, can you?
What blew me away was how huge this thing must have been, when I compared the footage to what I was seeing.
Can you send Sarah a picture, Telly?
Yeah.
I send it to you in text.
Yes.
Just for bulkiness is what it sounds like what you're talking about on it. Just the actual.
Yeah, the mass of it, like its legs. That's one thing that I remembered seeing, that kind of stuck in my mind, was like this thing had tree trunks for legs, basically. And it's funny because I said that same phrase to someone back, when this first happened, and it ended up in the newspaper that I saw Groot. I was like, no, I don't mean literally, guys. I mean, I saw it was big. Like, I'm trying to like tell you how big it was a mess. One of my friends, I had a friend who was like really into Bigfoot. And so when I had the sighting, one of the first people I got a hold of was him. And he's like, oh, you gotta report this. You gotta get on like BFRO. You gotta file a report. And I was like, what is that? And he's like, it's this Bigfoot organization. And I was like, yeah, okay. So, and I was just a ball of nerves for days after, because this sighting blew my mind. And so I made a report. Next thing I knew, it was in the newspaper.
Oh, wow.
The newspaper. And I was like, why is this in, why? I didn't see that coming. I didn't agree to this. So it kind of snowballed, and like all of the big paranormal websites, like Coast to Coast and everything, they were carrying it. And I was like, they're making me sound like an idiot. First of all, like they're all, it was a disaster. It was crazy.
I sent those pictures to you for after the show.
Okay.
I know I don't know if you're filming on your phone tonight or.
Oh no, I'm on my computer right now. Luckily,
okay.
I can check them out.
I thought I still had the Dogman picture, but I can't find it.
You can't find it?
No.
I'll send it to you again.
All right.
But yeah, things can be very easily misconstrued, to your point. Like if you do see something, there's a lot of people that automatically go into Crazyville with those kind of stories, which sucks because, sometimes it makes very legitimate things seem ambiguous, I guess.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm trying to think of what else we can get into before we let you go. What about investigation wise, like paranormal investigations? Did you ever see anything that like compelled you to believe in the paranormal?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I've had a lot of really good paranormal experiences. Somebody asked me, I did a podcast a few years ago, and it was with this guy that I'd never talked to before, and I didn't really know what to expect. And he asked me, he's like, what's like the best ghost experience or whatever you've ever had? And I was so eager to tell him. I was like, oh, it was scary and it was awesome and it was exhilarating and all these things. And he's like, well, which one is it? I'm like, it's all of those things at the same time. Like when you see something paranormal, it's all of that at once. And it's hard for me to say, like, what is the wildest, craziest, best, scariest thing I've ever seen, because they're all special in different ways. You know what I mean? And until you see something paranormal, people who haven't seen paranormal stuff, they're not ever going to get it until they do.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I've had some really crazy experiences. I've seen full apparitions, like full body apparitions. We did an investigation at Benham Schoolhouse Inn. If you're from Kentucky, you probably South Kentucky, I guess you probably know about Benham. It's a pretty popular place. I suppose it's still there. Last I heard, it was still a bed and breakfast, but it's an old building, so I don't know if it's still standing at this point. I saw like a full body apparition of a kid run through the hallway, and
did it make noise or?
No, and it's funny too, because like the place is laid out really weird. So it was a school. It was originally built for coal camp kids, like the coal mining families that come in. They needed a school to send all the kids to, so they built one. I think it was like, what was it, like K through 5th, 6th grade? I don't know. Basically an elementary school, I think. I don't remember all the details, but there was not, and this is something too, like I have to go on like kind of a off ramp to nowhere here. But a lot of people think that when it comes to like paranormal stuff, that in order to see paranormal activity, like there has to be some type of tragedy or something, in the history for there to be some type of activity. That's not true. I really don't believe that that's true. There doesn't have to be tragedy. There doesn't have to be violence. There doesn't have to be bloodshed. I think that just like a heightened level of emotion for a long period of time is good enough to sometimes leave an imprint on things. And I think, whether it's residual or whether it's just, it's just what it is. Like I saw an apparition of a kid. There are no kids that passed away violently as far as I know. You know what I mean? Like, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. People always say like, oh, it's, did people get murdered on this property? I don't think you have to.
I've also heard, places that are around certain electrical, like certain levels of electricity, like houses that may be close to not a power plant, but the big kind of conduits that exist around
the substations.
Yeah, the substations. There's actually, everybody knows Bobby Mackey's. There's actually a large substation very close to Bobby Mackey's that I think kind of perpetuates some of that stuff that goes on there. But anyway, I didn't mean to go on a sub tangent.
No, yeah, it's fine. Yeah, I think like water, they say water is like conducive to paranormal activity. Limestone. I think the limestone one is legit. I think that's legit, like a solid concept, because there are places we investigated over the years and it would be like, oh, this place is super haunted, extra active. Turns out it's also made of limestone. So correlation versus causation, I don't know. Maybe it was water there. Maybe it was a coincidence, but
I don't know. I think if I saw a full body apparition of a child running, I would be skedaddling in the opposite direction.
It looked like a legit little kid though. And the funny thing is when that happened, they were supposed to shut Benham down that night. They weren't supposed to rent out rooms, because at that point in time they were functioning as a bed and breakfast, and we were supposed to have it to ourselves. And there was like a bunch of like traveling workers or something stopped in. I guess, they went ahead and gave them rooms. So there was like 5 or 6 work trucks in the parking lot. And those guys, they went to their room with their cooler of beer and went to sleep, whatever. They weren't any trouble. They didn't interrupt us or anything like that. But I remember at one point I was like, so did they end up going ahead and renting out rooms? Because like, where did that kid come from? There was no kid there. And it's, you would have to see, like, I wish I'd have sent you a picture. I didn't know I was going to talk about this, but I have pictures of this hallway. So they have like kind of a weird stairwell. I saw the kid from up above, but there, when you look down off of the stairwell, there's also a door coming this way and one underneath. So one of the other investigators was down underneath me, and I saw this kid run through, and I'm like looking over the stairs, and I'm like, "Hey, Justin," I was like, "Who is that kid?" He's like, "What kid?" I'm like, "The kid that just ran through in front of you." He's like, "I didn't see her. You know, I didn't see a kid." I was like, "Yeah, there's a little kid." And then that's when I was kind of going around asking everybody, is like, "Did they rent out the rooms?" Nope. They didn't.
Oh,
Just
no.
some work trucks, yeah.
Wow.
That's
You want to? We was talking about the Dogman earlier. You want to see the picture that Steven has of the?
I know Sarah's seen it before, but you can show the
Yeah.
show the
Sure.
audience.
Have you seen it?
Yeah,
Look
I've
at
shared it with her.
That's crazy looking to me. Like,
Yeah, that's wild.
That's pretty
Yeah.
legit right there.
Yeah, we were together. I mean, we actually had a 4570 with us that day, and we set it down to take pictures. So
That's neat.
Yeah, I would definitely have a 4570
Yeah.
as well if I saw something like that.
Well, Sarah, I'm curious. I know you've been to these different haunted places. Have you ever gone out with a team to like an abandoned coal mine where maybe there was a disaster that took place to check out something like that?
We never did any coal mines. We used to go, there were a couple of battlefields that we went to a few times. Like if you're talking just in regards to like places where there was a lot of bloodshed or, you know, havoc or something, I'd say the battlefields were probably the closest we came in terms of bad juju with the history.
Yeah.
And I had one experience on the battlefield. I never can remember which one it is. It's somewhere. I always get the P's mixed up. Paintsville, Pikeville, and Prestonsburg. I think it's in Prestonsburg. There's a battlefield out there somewhere. And I hated investigating out there. I was always like, this is such a waste of time. But like, if we didn't have a case, we would go out there and piddle around sometimes. And we were out there one night, and every battery and everything just drained, was immediately dead. And it's like, oh, well, this is kind of interesting. And then I was walking through the field at one point, and I walked into I didn't see it, but I walked into a wall of pipe smoke, like pipe tobacco smoke.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
strong. It was 100% real, but you couldn't see anything. And obviously we weren't out there smoking a pipe while we're ghost hunting. So, you know, but stuff like that, I feel like is maybe residual.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, I see a comment here. Alan I know you did a story on the graveyard that disappears. I think there is a graveyard in Kentucky. I'm not sure if you remember where, Sarah.
So incidentally, there are a lot of places that have like the same kind of urban legends. The one that I did the video on, I can't remember. Let me see.
It was crap. I wanted to go there totally. It's where the cars die and everything. What's it called?
I don't think it's the Gates of Hell. I don't think it's that one.
No, the Gates of Hell, that one's got kind of a different lore attached to it. The disappearing cemetery. I'm trying to find it in my notes and I can't. Yeah, I can't remember right off where it is. It's somewhere in eastern Kentucky, I think.
If you go to Sarah's TikTok, and you should watch all the videos on there first of all, but you will also find the disappearing graveyard.
Yeah, I can't remember. I do so much research, you guys. I read, like, it's something that fills way too many hours of my life, is like constant reading and researching for these things. So I can't keep track of all of it. Sometimes I'll be on a stream on TikTok and I'll be like, I think I have a video about that, don't I? Like somebody will bring up something and be like, I'm pretty sure I made a video about that. I don't even know. But yeah, the disappearing cemetery is a really interesting story.
Was it Baker Hollow?
Baker Hollow. Yeah, that's it. That's the one. It is. Yeah. But there are a lot of other places that have that kind of story attached to them too. So just like Gravity Hill, like there's a bunch of Gravity Hills. You know?
Yeah. Those are always crazy stories to me. Like
Yeah.
I know that they've kind of disproven it or say that they've disproven it with science, but it's still bizarre.
Yeah.
So are those the ones where you can pull your car up, say, to the edge of the highway and it pulls your vehicle backward or something like that?
It pulls you like uphill.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. We actually had one right here. It was like 10 miles from my house here that used to be a roadside park. You know how they just have the little pull-offs used to have. And for whatever reason, the state let somebody buy it and they built a house there. But I remember that. I remember it could have simply been an illusion, but I remember doing that, putting my truck in neutral, and I went back up the hill. So that was it was pretty wild. And you kept gaining speed. It's what was weird.
Crazy.
We need to all schedule a hunt, like, and what we should do is go specifically for Bigfoot's ghost.
It's crazy. I'll go ahead and tell you one. Somewhere, I've looked for the SD cards. I promise I have. This would have been like 2011, 2012. Had game cameras out on some land that I own. And we had one picture of where there were coons just taking the corn out of the feeder. And next thing you know, the coons are all gone, and there's this ghostly looking figure. It's kind of like it's kind of like a fog, but you could make out a head. You could see a beard, and it didn't quite look human. It looked more Bigfoot than human.
Ghost of Bigfoot.
It is as absurd as what that may sound. I actually had a picture of that at one time.
I agree that we do need to get out and do something before it gets too cold in the next couple months. We'll get your hot spot somewhere where we can do a stream and just do something crazy. The people from Souls Chapel still haven't reached back out to me. Hit them up to no avail so far.
That's literally 7 minutes down the road from me.
Yeah, that would be an awesome. That would be an awesome one. But yeah, we'll have to do this again, Sarah. Especially if you get some updates on the true crime stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
But in the meantime, you obviously are more than welcome to come on with us anytime we're talking about crazy stuff, or to crazy people for that matter, which we do often.
Same, yeah.
Yeah. We have witnessed firsthand a lot of that.
I still want to get someone on here that writes Bigfoot erotica.
We have somebody.
I'm
supposed to be writing Bigfoot smut, but I just can't. I can't get started. I need to find my muse.
Oh my goodness.
Bigfoot was bathing in a stream as I happened upon him suddenly.
On that note, Sarah, tell everybody what you have going on currently.
Well, all kinds of stuff. Like I said earlier, I'm over on TikTok. I do the ghost story live stream. Don't have a solid schedule right now. I'm kind of bouncing around, but usually it's probably going to be on Fridays. So if you're interested, come hang out, watch some streams, come tell a ghost story if you have one. Let's see, what else am I doing? Also, I have a book of short horror stories, like Appalachian folk horror stories, that's out now. I don't know how to tell you to get there other than just go to my social media and look for some links. I don't know.
Yeah, after this video, if you look in the description of the video, we have a link to all of Sarah's stuff, including her author profile, which you should go check out and follow as well.
Yeah, do that. That's cool. That works. What else? Let's see. Is there anything else? I don't even know. I don't know. I'm just out here, just living and just, looking for Bigfoot and some ghosts and stuff. So that's me.
I'll drop a pin for you, Cecil, where I think might be a good spot for you to go try sometime.
Okay.
Matt Bortles says that you need to watch Sasquatch Sunset again for inspiration.
Oh my God. Sasquatch Sunset. I tried to watch it, dude. It's so boring.
Really?
Yeah, I was like, oh my god, this is horrible. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on. I mean, we love having you on here all the time, and
Yes.
we like coming on your show when I can stay awake because I'm not a night owl.
It is, yeah,
I'm really not either. You guys have got to come and stream with me again, and Morgana hopefully come too.
yeah. Morgana's in the chat right now. She never got
she
to
is?
tell any stories.
Yeah. I was so sad we lost her before I could, because I was trying to figure out the format as we went. I was like, okay, so what do I do? Like, I'll have them tell stories in between the guests telling stories. Like, I don't know. It was a free for all, but I appreciate you guys coming on and streaming with me, and hopefully you all come back again.
Yeah, for sure. It was unfortunate. I know you wanted to take like we were at the main end of it, and you're like, we're gonna take one more. And it just went completely sideways
Off the rails, man.
as it does sometimes.
Yeah, just totally.
But yeah.
Like the night was great until that last guy, and then I was just like, yeet. Bye bye, dude.
I'll throw you off by then.
Yeah, Morgana said that she loved it, and that next time she will tell some stories.
Awesome. That would be awesome.
But thank you so much, and thanks for everybody for hanging out with us.
Yep.
We'll be back next Friday at 7 Eastern on Where in the Folk to tell you about crazy stuff all around the planet. And we're kind of getting some different ideas together for another Saturday long form. I'm kind of putting together a chronology of mind control. So we may do like a really long episode. That'll probably be like a 2-3 hour episode craziness to go through the history of different mind control programs and stuff like that. Go through the white papers.
Yep. And like Tully said, you can catch us every Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern time on Wearing the Folk everywhere, except audio only. That comes out later if I remember to upload it. I literally did a drop of 8 episodes like 2 days ago because
You just need to get us caught up.
Yeah. And check out Sara Paranormally Correct on TikTok, and Weird Awakenings every Friday right after Wearing the Folk on Weird Realities Network at 8 o'clock Eastern time. And thank you all for watching us, because we're watching you.
Well, we'll see you.